Do you believe that your husband killed President Kennedy?
I don't want to believe, but I have too much facts, and facts tell me that Lee shot Kennedy.
Did Lee ever tell you that he was going to do this?
He never done tell me this. And this was a very bad surprise.
On November 22, 1963, when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, the name Lee Harvey Oswald entered the annals of American history as the alleged lone gunman. But the tragedy didn't end with his death. In many ways, the aftermath for his young wife, Marina, and their small children was just beginning. Who was Marina Oswald, the Soviet emigre who married Oswald, bore his children, and then found herself widowed amidst one of the 20th century's greatest controversies? What became of her, of their daughters, and of her life once Lee was gone? From Minsk to marriage. Marina Nikolaevna Prusakova was born in 1941 in the Soviet Union, and her childhood was shaped by the hardships of World War II and post-war austerity. Raised mostly by her mother, she grew up in a society where survival often came before personal dreams. By her early 20s, Marina had secured work as a pharmacist's assistant in Minsk, an ordinary life by Soviet standards. Yet history intervened when an American defector named Lee Harvey Oswald crossed her path. Oswald, a former U.S. Marine who had renounced his country and sought refuge in the USSR, was living in Minsk under close watch by Soviet authorities. To Marina, he was unusual, an American who spoke halting Russian, exuded confidence, and seemed eager to make a fresh start. The two met at a dance in March 1961. Within 6 weeks, they married. Their union was marked from the beginning by cultural contrasts and personal tension. Oswald struggled with his identity, swinging between bitterness towards the United States and disillusionment with Soviet life. Marina, on the other hand, sought stability and family. In February 1962, she gave birth to their first daughter, June. For a brief moment, the family appeared settled, but Oswald soon pressed to return to the U.S., a decision that altered the course of their lives forever. Life in America. Struggles, isolation, and the Dallas years. When the Oswalds moved to the U.S. in 1962, Marina was just 21 years old, unable to speak English, and unfamiliar with American customs. They settled first in Fort Worth, Texas, before drifting to Dallas. Life was difficult. Oswald, restless and often dissatisfied with his jobs, struggled to support his young family. Marina, isolated and dependent on others to translate, found herself living on the margins of American society. Financial hardship was constant. The couple relied heavily on the kindness of acquaintances, many of whom were fascinated by the young Russian woman and her American defector husband. Marina soon learned that her husband's temper could be volatile. Accounts from friends and later testimony suggested episodes of domestic abuse and control. Yet she remained raising their children, June and later Rachel, born in October 1963, in modest apartments and borrowed rooms. By late 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald's political obsessions had intensified. He had attempted, unsuccessfully, to assassinate retired General Edwin Walker, a staunch anti-communist. He openly spoke of Marxism, Cuba, and his disdain for American capitalism. Marina, by contrast, seemed increasingly resigned, focusing her energy on her daughters rather than her husband's politics. The stage was set for November 22, 1963, when Oswald would forever be linked to the death of President Kennedy. In the immediate aftermath, Marina's world collapsed. She was suddenly the widow to the most hated man in America with 2 young children to protect.
You killed the president?
No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about it was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question.
The aftermath of November 22nd. When gunfire rang out in Dealey Plaza, Marina was at the home of a friend with her newborn, Rachel, and toddler, June. Hours later, her husband was arrested for the murder of President Kennedy and soon after for the killing of Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit. In the span of 2 days, her world imploded. On November 24th, as millions watched on live television, Lee Harvey Oswald himself was gunned down by nightclub owner Jack Ruby in the basement of the Dallas Police Department. At only 22 years old, Marina was left a widow, the mother of 2 daughters, and at the epicenter of a national trauma. The U.S. Secret Service quickly placed her under protective custody, both for her safety and for questioning. To the American public, she was a figure of deep fascination, the beautiful, enigmatic Russian bride of the man accused of assassinating the president. Newspapers and magazines clamored for photos of her, and offers of financial assistance poured in. Yet public attention was double-edged. Donations from sympathetic Americans provided her with temporary security, but she also endured hostility and suspicion. Some saw her as a possible accomplice, others pitied her as a naive woman trapped in circumstances beyond her control. Her close friend Ruth Payne spoke about Marina.
How is Mrs. Oswald? What were her feelings? Did she ever express them to you in conversation about this country?
Yes, she likes this country very much. She would like very much to stay here and raise her children here. She has felt people very friendly. She's a person who would easily make friends if she knew the language. And I think as she learns the language, will make friends. Of course, this event will make a great problem for her there.
Testimony, trauma, and the Warren Commission. In early 1964, Marina Oswald's cooperation became central to the official investigation into Kennedy's assassination. She provided testimony to the Warren Commission, the government body tasked with determining whether Lee Harvey Oswald had acted alone. Speaking through interpreters, Marina described her husband's growing political radicalism, his attempts to defect to Cuba, and his volatile behavior at home. Her testimony helped establish key details of Oswald's activities, including his attempted shooting of General Edwin Walker and his acquisition of the rifle linked to Kennedy's assassination. But her words weren't without controversy. She admitted she often withheld information out of fear of her husband's temper. She also confessed she had not initially reported his attempt on Walker's life, a detail critics of the Warren Commission later seized upon as evidence of flaws in the investigation. For Marina, the process was grueling. She was thrust into the spotlight as a witness and a young mother trying to keep her family afloat. FBI agents, lawyers, and journalists swirled around her daily life, leaving her little privacy. The hearings and the commission's eventual conclusion that Oswald acted alone did nothing to erase the public suspicion and conspiracy theories that grew around the case. The new beginning. By the mid-60s, Marina Oswald was desperate to reclaim a sense of normalcy. The constant scrutiny, the endless questions from reporters, and the burden of raising two children alone weighed heavily. In 1965, she met Kenneth Porter, a divorced electronics worker from Texas. Unlike Lee, Kenneth offered her stability, quiet companionship, and the possibility of a future not defined by the past. The two married that year, and Marina took his name, becoming Marina Oswald Porter. For the first time since leaving Minsk, she began to feel anchored. She and Kenneth lived a modest suburban life in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, raising June and Rachel alongside Kenneth's children from a previous marriage. In 1989, after decades of residency, Marina achieved U.S. citizenship, a milestone that symbolized both her independence and commitment to the country she had once entered as the reluctant wife of a defector. Living under the shadow. Despite efforts to live quietly, Marina could never escape the lingering fascination with her first husband. The assassination remained a defining national trauma, and Marina's proximity to the event ensured her continued place in the narrative. Journalists revisited her story every November, conspiracy theorists pestered her for insights, and books about the assassination often quoted her testimony. Over time, she herself expressed doubts about the official story. While she had testified in 1964 that her husband was guilty, by the 80s and 90s, she voiced skepticism about whether he had truly acted alone. Privately, she battled the ordinary challenges of life, financial strains, health issues, and the difficulties of raising children under constant scrutiny. June and Rachel grew up aware their last name carried a stigma, and Marina worked to shield them from the cruel curiosity of the outside world. Growing up as Oswald's daughters. For June and Rachel, childhood was never ordinary. June was only 22 months old when her father was arrested. Rachel was just 5 weeks old on the day of the assassination. In the years following, the girls lived under the protective but watchful eye of their mother and stepfather, Kenneth Porter. Despite their difficulties, both girls strove for normalcy. June later described her childhood as one of constant adjustment, balancing the simple joys of growing up in Texas with the burden of her family name. Their adult lives. June pursued higher education and went on to work in business and law. She eventually married and started a family of her own. She occasionally gave interviews reflecting on her childhood, speaking candidly about the challenges of being the assassin's daughter. Rachel, younger and less directly connected to her father's memory, took a different approach. She lived more privately, avoiding the public eye whenever possible. Both sisters wrestled with a peculiar inheritance. Their lives were shaped by a man they either barely remembered or never knew. Now it's time to hear from you. What's the most surprising part of this story? Let us know in the comments section below.